Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes. You need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs in Greenville or outside of Greenville. Actually, a lot of my closings right now are in Spartanburg, Anderson, all over the place. So people that are from outside of the area might not fully understand this, but Greenville, small market, we cover a lot of territory here. In fact, Greenville County itself, you go from the northern part of Greenville County to the absolute southern tip of it, you're probably driving over an hour. I've never actually done the drive, but I believe it's probably an hour 15 or so if you really do it and actually follow the speed limit. So yeah, keep that in mind. All of my contact info is in the show notes, and please support this show. Very simple. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button. You can't do it from your phone. You can only do it from a computer. If you're on your phone, well, thank you for thinking about it. But if you're on your phone on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can leave a 5-star rating. And I believe on both platforms, you can leave a review as well. And I'd really appreciate if you guys did that. We're going to be talking about the mistakes each generation of home buyers and sellers makes. This is going to be controversial because the last time I did something like this, I had a bunch of Gen X people that had not listened to the show, that only saw that the headline of my show, got really angry. And they got angry that they thought, based on the headline, based on the title of my show, that I was saying that they are basically a useless generation. And I wasn't at all saying that. What I was saying was that they got left behind, squeezed out by the other generations that bracket them, and that it wasn't their fault. And so I'm very well prepared to have some angry people from different generations responding to this. But you know what? Hey, when it comes to podcasts, if we've learned anything, content creation, all press is good press, right? So if you get angry, good. I'm happy. I'm willing to welcome that anger from whichever generation brings it. Some of these generations are going to be more prone for listening to podcasts than others. So there's that element. But I do recommend you listen to the whole thing before you get angry, unlike those angry Gen Xers last time. All right, but before we get into the controversy, I want to discuss real quick, for those that don't already know this, I'm a part of the Realtor Political Action Committee. That also might be triggering and controversial for some people, but I promise we do it. It's for a good cause. It's not, yes, we are a special interest group, but our special interests aren't just trying to pump up everything real estate related. In fact, we're fighting for housing affordability, which is something that is a big problem in the area. We're fighting for private property rights, which is something that a lot of the local counties and cities are, quite frankly, trying to take away from their constituents. And yes, we are fighting as well for realtors. For instance, there are lawsuits against the real estate industry that are baseless in a lot of ways, antitrust lawsuits, things of that nature. And so we do fight for those things as well. Although I'm on the Greenville committee, I'm on the South Carolina State Committee, and so it's not really that involved with that. We're focused on trying to actually make the real estate environment better for Greenville and for the state of South Carolina in a lot of different ways. And the things that we're pushing for, I don't think too many of my listeners would be opposed to it. Okay, so with all of that in mind, we had a meeting, my committee had a meeting with Congressman William Timmons. He's the congressman in Greenville and Spartanburg, and has been in office since 2019. Prior to that, he was a South Carolina state senator. He's currently a military vet. He's on several different committees and subcommittees. And he's always been very accessible to our committee, to realtors in general, to a lot of people, regardless of what you think about Congressman Timmons. And I know there's a lot of opinions about him. A lot of people don't like him, and a lot of people do like him. whatever side of that you're on, just understand that from my perspective, if someone comes and he met with us for an hour, extremely generous with his time, and when someone does that, that even if I disagree with some of the things, and you guys know I've had politicians on the show that have very, very different viewpoints. So I don't play those sorts of games where it's like you have to agree with me on everything in order for me to have a conversation with you. That's just not my personality. Um, so he was very generous with his time. Met with our committee on Friday of this past week and shared a lot of very extremely interesting things that I'm not going to be able to get into in the show. But there's one thing that's very timely that I do want to get into, and that is the government shutdown. Did an episode on that just a few weeks ago, and there's a lot of headlines about, well, it might end this week, it might end, blah, 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 blah. And there's prediction markets now. If you guys are familiar with that, you can bet on when the government shutdown is going to end. The days have been increasing, but then last week they started to come down. Well, the news that I have for you is that Congressman William Timmons, who has obviously he is directly affected by this government shutdown, right? And he was actually very annoyed by it, or at least he put on an air of annoyance. Understand that people in Congress, they, when you have a government shutdown, they can't act like they're happy about it, right? They have to act outraged. And I think I don't think that he was faking it because he was talking about how he's got to figure out how to pay his staff. His staff can't be paid when there's a government shutdown, things like that. So it does directly affect him. He's not, he didn't seem too happy about it. And his opinion was that we still most likely have several weeks left of the government shutdown before something is done. And there's going to be we're right in the middle of the thick of it, debates over SNAP benefits, over some other things that need to be paid sooner than later. And he thinks that the president might do some kind of, you might say creative, so others might say illegal or shisty, but that the president might do some things to try to, and I just realized my phone is not muted. Let me mute that. The president may try to do some things, for instance, with tariff revenue to pay for some things during the government shutdown that are not normally supposed to be paid during a government shutdown, and basically put the Democrats in a weird place in terms of like opposing what he is doing, and then basically saying, well, they are, against SNAP benefits, for instance. Now, again, he was conjecturing on some of that. I don't know exactly how much, inside information that he has at the end of the day, but he is there in Washington. He's been there for 6 years. He was endorsed by the president for his last election. And I think that was a big reason why he won his last election as well. And so, long story short, he thought this government shutdown might go until Thanksgiving, maybe even later. So if you're affected by the government shutdown, thankfully, I haven't had any, knock on wood, any real estate transactions yet that have been affected by it. But a lot of people have, and if you're affected by it, just be prepared that you might need to tread water for a few more weeks, maybe even longer than a few more weeks. So I wanted to give you guys that little update because, again, what you're reading on the media, the media changes what they say every day. But this was directly from someone who is in the closed door meetings and hearing what's happening and has direct access to the president. And so I thought you guys would find that interesting. Okay. Let's talk about generations, and let's talk about the mistakes that each generation makes, mostly when it comes to home buying. There are mistakes when it comes to home selling, but I really want to talk mainly about home buying, because that's where kind of we see a lot of a lot of the quirks that are generational, I feel like, come out. Some of these will apply to both buying and selling, but I'm going to start at the top with the silent generation. Okay. I have had clients that are of the silent generation. So I'm not just speaking theoretically here. Every one of these categories I have had clients from. I have not had any from the greatest generation, and so I'm not going to include them on here. That's the only reason I'm not including them on here. Of course, the greatest generation, a lot of them, there's not a ton from that generation that are still with us. Most of the ones that are not doing real estate transactions. That's also part of it. Same is true mostly for the silent generation, but there's still, I think, close to 2 million of them, and they still, a few of them still do real estate transactions. I had one earlier this year. And here's what I'd say about that generation. In general, the mistake that they make is that they believe that real estate transactions are too difficult. The way we made them, we've added all these layers. We made it too difficult. They don't require technology. They don't require experts like inspectors, etc. There's all of these layers, almost like a bureaucracy that have been added on top. A real estate transaction needs to be, it should just be very simple. When I bought my house in the 50s, it was a handshake agreement, and then an attorney filled out the deed, and that was that. Why do we need all of these other things? I had a silent generation client once that they had owned a home in another state for a very, very long time, and they were moving here to be closer to family, and they discovered that their home had tons of termite damage. They actually sold their home, not the one here, but the home that they were moving from. They ended up selling that home for pennies on the dollar of what they were expecting, because they hadn't considered that they needed to test for termites, that they needed to treat for termites, all of that. And so there's just a little bit of a well, things are simpler now, than they really are in the mind. And again, I'm talking with really broad strokes here. There's going to be exceptions to everything that I say. So I don't want to make it sound like this is every single person from this generation is like this. Please don't hear that I'm saying that. But these are just general mindsets that these generations have, and this is one of them, that I need to, as a realtor, I need to help them to understand oftentimes that, hey, there's a lot that can go wrong in a real estate transaction. There's a lot that can be wrong with a house, like termites. There's a lot of things that, in general, that you need to consider, and this is one of the main values now that a realtor does bring to the table when you're doing a real estate transaction. It used to be that realtors had were the gatekeepers of the entire market, right? We were the only ones that had access to the multiple listing service. We were the only ones that had access to, or before the multiple listing service, we were the only ones that had access to our brokerage's listings, et cetera, et cetera. Now you can just go on Zillow, you can go on Realtor.com, whatever. You can see everything that's out there. The value of a realtor generally isn't finding a home for buyer clients. And technically speaking, you can list a home on Zillow for sale by owner without a realtor as well, right? And so that a lot of people get confused and don't understand what exactly the value is. And a lot of the value is getting through the transaction, understanding all of the pitfalls of a transaction. I mean, I've got some clients right now that the amount of niche cases that we're dealing with easements and mobile home detitling and potentially having to split pieces of land up and and weird financing conditions, all sorts of different things. And where else can you go to someone that's like a one-stop shop that understands what that understands all of those things and understands the pitfalls and here's some strategy and here's how we can account for this, et cetera, et cetera. Um, not just trying to pump up realtors, right? I am doing that, but I'm that actually wasn't at all part of the plan. But the point is that um, there is complexity to all of this. A lot of it you can thank the government for, and it just is what it is. And so that's something I have to coach when I get clients from the silent generation. I have to coach them on that. I will say on the flip side, sometimes depending on where they're coming from, they actually they might have an idea that things are actually way more complex than they should be, right? I had one client right now, not right now, but in the past, I had a client that was from New York and had done some things in real estate in New York, and they had all these ideas for complex things from New York that just don't really apply here in Greenville. Run into that sometimes, but for the most part, it's the opposite. For the most part, it's the assumption, oh, things are simple. Why do we don't need all these inspections. Come on, let's just get to the closing table. And it's like, no, you need to protect yourself. And there are a lot of things that need to happen in order to make sure that a real estate buyer is fully protected. Because once you close, again, it may have been in the old days that you closed on your house and you could still get in contact with the sellers. And if you found that there was something wrong, the sellers would come over and they'd fix it. Listen, once a seller sells their house, they're done. In 2025, they're not going back. And nor should they, right? That's something that we had to clean up because if you have this, you know, this sort of handshake agreement that the seller is just going to continue to resolve things down the road for someone that's already purchased their house, that's a nightmare. Imagine being the seller of a home and having to still be resolving things months or years later. No, no, thank you. There's been progress with that, but with that progress has come some complexity to the real estate transaction because no more there's no more handshake agreements on anything. Everything's got to be in writing. Everything's got to be done according to various timelines. And some people, if they've not had a real estate transaction in decades, might not fully appreciate that. All right, let's move on to baby boomers. The number one buyer and seller of real estate for the past couple of years. Um, Here's what I run into a lot with the baby boomer generation. Again, I'll probably need to say this for everyone. This is not one size fits all. This is just what I've run into a lot, what I've heard other people run into. Oftentimes, what I'll hear from them is something to the effect of it. We're looking at homes and I love a lot of things about the home, but it just needs, I wish I had better trim, for instance. I wish I had more high-end trim. Or I wish, the it had nicer doors. Or I wish the granite was the countertops were a nicer granite or quartz or something like that. Or I wish the doorways were larger or whatever. There's all sorts of things that I've heard. And, every time it's like, I'll say, well, it that all of those things can be done. Okay, I have contractors that I work with. You might have contractors that let's figure out what would it actually cost to do this? How feasible is it? How hard is it to do these things? Because honestly, most of the time when I hear these sorts of concerns, especially from the baby boomer generation, I'm like, this is a piece of cake. Like, these are the sorts of things that people are doing to their homes all the time. And it's not that hard. And it's oftentimes not that expensive. But what I tend to hear in response is like, oh, no, that's just way too difficult. It's way too expensive. No, we can't deal with that. And then oftentimes what they end up doing is they end up buying a much more expensive home that has all of those things than if they had just bought the other home that I showed them that didn't have those things and then just added those things later. And that's fine if someone wants to do that. I understand not wanting to have to do a bunch of updates to a home the moment that you buy it. It completely makes sense to me. And I'm not going to dismiss that at all. But if you're concerned about price point, you really need to be willing to consider actually doing updates. And you can, like, particularly the baby boomer generation right now, they're generally cash buyers. So you're already a cash buyer. So you don't need to worry about, financing conditions or anything like that. You can buy a home that's really inexpensive, that maybe needs some little cosmetic updates. Do the cosmetic updates and boom, you've got a home that is worth a lot more than what you bought it for and a lot cheaper than what it would have been had you bought a home that had all those things to begin with. And that's something I can't, I mean, I have run into this so many times. And it's just something, again, I try to coach people through this and try to help them to understand, listen, we don't need to get stuck on the condition of the home or on the features and whatnot. There are some things obviously that are harder to change than others, like the layout of the house, right? Once you start taking down walls and adding walls and whatnot, that gets really complicated because now you've got to move potentially electrical plumbing, you've got to patch ceilings and blend those in, you've got to patch flooring, make that work. That's a whole thing. But we're talking about countertops, we're talking about appliances. Like these are the sorts of things that I've heard. Trim, door sizes, you know, the being able to another one for people that are not as mobile, you know, access being able to get into the shower, right? The shower has a certain lip. You could replace a shower, right? A few $1,000s to replace a shower. Would you rather do that? Or would you rather try to hold out for the one in, I don't know, 1,000 home that has exactly what you're looking for, exactly in the area that you're looking, and you're potentially going to be bidding against others looking for that same thing since it's so rare, and you're going to end up having to pay a premium for it? Would you rather do that? Again, I try to coach people through this. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. Um, but at the end of the day, it's not my job to tell them what to do. I simply offer my thoughts, my feedback, my advice, however I can help, and then the client has to decide. Gen X, the people that like to get angry on at my YouTube channel, whenever I talk about them, sorry guys, not trying to throw shade at you. Here's the thing I hear most from Gen X. This is an interesting one. I hear the most from them that they need to save up for a large down payment in order to be able to afford a house. Now, I don't want to. I am regardless of what you think about Dave Ramsey. I have mixed feelings on Dave Ramsey as a personality and on some of his extremely conservative advice. But I am a Ramsey trusted real estate professional. I've gone through their training and all of that. I fully understand the value of having a low loan to value type of situation where you've got a large down payment, you're not paying PMI, your monthly payments are not as high as they could be. I fully understand all of that. But what I've run into multiple times is people get fixated on this large down payment idea. What ends up happening is the market starts appreciating in a way that, well, before my large down payment was going to be $40,000, right? they're trying to get to maybe 20% down. And maybe, they're looking at $200,000 homes, which in Greenville doesn't get you a whole lot, right? Because our median is well above 300 at this point. But let's just say 40,000 for the sake of argument. $40,000 down payment. But they don't have that. Maybe they've got 30,000. It's like, well, in a year, we'll be able to save that extra 10,000 and get to 40. Then we'll be able to buy the house. Well, a year goes by, and now the type of house that they're looking for now costs 225,000. So now actually they need 45 in order to hit the 20% down. So now they're $5,000. Even though they saved 10,000, they're still behind. They're still behind by $5,000. So now they're waiting a little bit longer. Well, guess what? The market appreciates some more. Now they save that 5,000. Now they still can't afford it. Now they need a $50,000 down payment. And well, thank goodness the market finally slows down. Well, the market slows down because the economy is slowing down. Now these people don't have overtime, or maybe even they lose their jobs. I've had clients lose their jobs the past year. And now they can't buy any house. And so this is something that is something that bothers me a lot of times, because it's like the United States is very unique in terms of our mortgage structure, right? That you could get a 30-year loan with 5% or less down. Incredible. A 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Your mortgage payment will never ever go up, with the exception of your escrows. If your mortgage payment is paying your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes, you might see your monthly payment go up because one of those or both of those things went up. Otherwise, you've got a fixed rate mortgage. Your loan itself is going to be fixed for 30 years. Other countries don't have this. This is a uniquely American convention. And it bothers me that people will sometimes miss, in my opinion, the forest for the trees, because they're just trying to hit a certain number, right? 20%, that's such a common number, but it's just a number. Like, there's no data behind that number that says, well, this is the magic number that will cause you to never foreclose. There's nothing like that, right? That's a number that helps you to avoid PMI usually in most loans, but there's plenty of loans out there that don't have PMI as well. Southern First Bank right now is offering a 0% down, no PMI loan, and it's not restricted to any specific location. Like, you can get that in downtown Greenville. So people get fixated on a certain number for whatever reason, and then they end up getting into this state of paralysis where they can never start looking at homes because they're trying to chase this number. And once you start to chase a number, good luck. It's really hard. It's really hard to catch that number that you're trying to chase, because, again, the market usually is appreciating. At least in Greenville it is. I know other markets in the United States right now aren't. Greenville is still appreciating. Not at the clip that it was a few years ago. But I mean, we just did the market stats episode. I believe the last month was what? It was like 3.5% year over year appreciation. That's a good bit of appreciation. I mean, that is conforming to a normal year for Greenville. And so if your income hasn't gone up by 3.5% the past year, you're already lagging behind because of that. So that's something that I hear, and again, I fully respect it. If I ever have a client, I never ever argue with my clients about down payments. Never. Because if they want to put down a larger down payment, I don't know their finances, right? That's beyond the scope of what me as a realtor can assist them with. I'm not a financial advisor. I could be sued for giving financial advice. I don't do it. And my brokerage tells all of our realtors, do not give financial advice. Okay. It's a bad idea. And so we don't do it. And so if I have a client that says we want to put 50% down, I'll try to understand why, but I'm not going to argue with them about it, because it's your finances. you know what you're comfortable. Sometimes it's not logical to me as a realtor. Not fully logical, but it doesn't matter, right? Because some of this is just the way you feel. If you don't, I know some people that they don't sleep well at night if they have a certain amount of debt. Who am I to try to convince them to not sleep well at night, right? But that being said, I can still sit back and be like, well, this is causing you, and again, I don't say this, but in my head, I might be thinking this is causing you to have to chase homes, and you might not be able to buy a home for several years. And by the time you do, it's going to be a smaller home than what you can afford right now. Not as nice of a home as what you can afford right now. Is that the best decision? Again, that's the decision that's not my call at the end of the day. That's the call of the buyer. Millennials, my generation, so I can say whatever I want here, right? I can be mean. Um, the thing I hear most from millennials is that 2008 will repeat itself. So I'm just waiting for the next crash. And this is a very millennial thing, right? And by the way, I should go back to Gen X for a second. Why I think that they have a tendency for being down payment obsessed is I think comes back to the fact that their generation tended to be dealing with debt, either their parents' debt or their debt, school student loan type of debt, going through multiple different recessions, which most people in Gen X did go through. I think they had to learn to be more frugal, and that's why a lot of that large down payment stuff happens. For millennials, very similar. There's this obsession with the 2008 global financial crisis and that it's going to repeat itself, and that's because all millennials went through it, right? We all went through it. We all experienced it. It was one of the most formative things for my generation. I literally graduated college in 2008. I went to Bob Jones. Bob Jones, what is like this? I'm not going to say what I want to say here, but it's like a fortified castle, right? Barbed wire pointing in. I literally, this is embarrassing for me to say, but nobody on campus was talking about the recession when I graduated in May of 2008. I had no idea we were in a recession. I had no idea. We didn't have TVs at Bob Jones. There was no news. I didn't have time to be like researching the news. I didn't care about the news. I'm a huge sports guy. I was barely able to even follow my sports teams while I was there. I was busy. I was studying. They had us, doing all sorts of stuff every single week in addition to our studies. And I was involved with sports. I was involved with all sorts of stuff. I was busy. I graduated into a recession that I didn't know existed. It turned out to be the worst recession of a generation. And so, yeah, that was great. So I know my experience is unique in this from the standpoint that it like completely caught me off guard in that embarrassing way. But at the end of the day, the that 2008 recession impacted all millennials in one way or another. And I cannot tell you how many, it's so aggravating, how many of these, I and others call them doomers, they are obsessed with this next big crash coming. And they're like, yeah, we're going to hold out. The next crash is coming. It's coming. And they always use these misleading charts to prove it. It's hilarious. There's one that went viral earlier this year, and it was a chart about multifamily housing. Okay. And I'm not talking about like duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes. I'm talking about large multifamily apartment complexes, things like that, and showing delinquency rates for apartment complexes. That is such a niche thing that has very little impact on the rest of the real estate market. Delinquency rates for apartment complexes. Do you think that's going to affect what your neighbor's house sells for? Do you think that's going to affect what the real estate market on a macro level is going to do? No, that's not how this works. That's commercial real estate. That's not even deemed residential real estate. And so And it's just unbelievable to me. There are accounts on X, formerly known as Twitter, in particular that love to, and on TikTok as well. They love to put this data out there, this misinformation. And I mean, like I said, that chart went viral and for showing that delinquencies are taking off in the large multifamily space. And it was just like, this is the most useless chart you could possibly come up with for assessing the state of the market. And millennials, so many of them just took the bait. They just fully took the bait. They're just like, "Oh no, it's finally happening. The crash is happening. Everyone's gonna lose their home. Everyone's gonna go into foreclosure. Yes, our generation will finally get cheap housing." And it's like, no, not because of that chart. That chart doesn't say that. And so, you know, they there's a guy I like to follow with a website and a media company called Housing Wire. Logan Motoshami, if you want to look him up, he's on Insta. He's on all the platforms. And Logan has like a running list of all of the different reasons people have given him for why the next crash is happening for like the past like 15 years. And it's really funny. And most of the people that are making the arguments that are on his list are millennials. Now, Logan himself is Gen X, not afraid to call out Gen X either, by the way. Um, and Logan's a little bit self aggrandizing. I don't know what the proper, I don't think I pronounced that right. But anyway, his personality doesn't work for everyone. And he can get on my nerves a little bit too. But he has consistently slayed the next housing crash is coming tomorrow crowd for a long time. And I really enjoy watching him do that over and over and over again. All right, moving on from millennials. Gen Z, this will be the last one. Gen Z, the most common mistake I hear from them is that they can't afford a move-in ready home, but they can somehow figure out how to make a fixer upper work. Okay. That is very, very rare. Okay. It's very, very rare that someone from the Gen Z crowd in 2025 is able to figure out how to make a fixer upper work. And what inevitably happens is they're looking at, a lot of these homes that have been built the past 10, 15 years that are more affordable. And we eventually look at a home that's like in a really established 30, 40-year-old neighborhood, but it's a fixer upper and they just fall in love with it, right? Fall in love with the character, fall in love with the character of the neighborhood, fall in love with the school district, all these different things. And but the house, has all of these different issues. And they're just like, "No, we can look past it." And it's like, well, you might be willing to look past it. Is the lender going to look past it? Is the appraiser going to look past it? What about when you get that inspection report that's 130 pages? Are you going to look past that? Are you going to waive those inspections? That's a bad idea. And so usually I end up talking people out of these sorts of situations, and it's pretty easy to do it, right? I just start pointing out all the problems. Ugh, this is bad. Ugh, it's they don't have updated electrical. This is a 100 amp service. If you start to run all of your different things at the same time, you're probably going to start to see your lights dim and things are not going to work as well as they should. I can see termite damage over here. And it's just usually once I start pointing out all of those things, usually they come around to their senses and are like, "Okay, yeah, we get it. We hear you, Stan. This is a little bit we fell in love with all of these other things, but we understand that this is going to be a lot more difficult to make work." Now, if I have a client that's just like, "No, we need to make this work." Well, guess what? I'm your guy. I will do whatever I can to make it work. And I've closed a bunch of loans that are renovation style loans. They have those for people buying owner occupied properties. You don't have to be an investor to qualify for a nice renovation loan. These loans, they you can get them 30-year fixed rate mortgages that allow you to bake in renovations into the loan, and then that allows the lender to basically look the other way as to the condition of the property. They're complicated though. It's not the easiest thing. You have to have a contractor, a licensed contractor. The licensed contractor has to provide a bid. And I can't remember if they've changed it in recent years. You have to get multiple bids. That might be a thing too. But then that contractor has to fill out tons and tons of paperwork, and then they have to stick to that bid. Like if we have a COVID type of situation where material costs and labor costs skyrocket, that contractor can't adjust his bid. And so not all contractors even want to do that, want to take on that sort of work. So there's just a whole lot of things that you have to account for. But again, this is where my value as a realtor can come into play, because my very first home that I bought with a 203K renovation loan. And I've helped many, many other clients over the years, not as much recently, for whatever reason, but I've helped many, many clients over the years close those sorts of loans. It could be a great way to buy something like what I just described. Like I said, that was what I bought. My first home, it was in a great established neighborhood, but the home was awful, awful. And so we had to buy it with a 203K loan. We got it up to the most minimal livable condition possible, and then did as much work as we could ourselves. And then saved up additional money to hire a contractor, a few years later to do a big renovation over there. So it's very possible, but a lot of the times when I'm working with a Gen Z client, they're pretty much always first-time home buyers. And it's more just a lack of understanding just how much work needs to be done, because they're just focused on just how much they love the home, but they don't have the eye for, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And so oftentimes when you're a first-time home buyer, Gen Z or not, right? A lot of millennials are first-time home buyers right now. The average first-time home buyer is 38 years old. That's millennials, right? That's only 1 year younger than me. So we're dealing with first-time home buyers here, and there's just a lack of experience that's involved with that, and the end result is a lot of them need to just understand you're not going to buy your perfect home as your first home for the most part. You're going to have to compromise, most likely, right? Especially the way prices are right now. Most of the time they have to compromise unless they're getting funds from parents or something like that. I've seen that happen. That's a great way, if you're a parent that is well off and you have kids that are looking for the first home, please help them out. Please do that. They need help. This economy is not designed for, the 22 to 25-year-old making $40,000 to $50,000 a year. This economy is kicking their butts. They're going to be stuck in that rent cycle. There's a reason why the average first-time home buyer is 38 years old, stuck in a cycle that left them behind at the end of the day. And so that's a very practical way that you as a parent can help them. You're not going to help them by pretending to be a home inspector. Dad, I saw one of these things recently that was like, how on, you may or may not know this, but on ChatGPT, you can create images that look like figurines of different things. And I've seen one go around a few times that's like the dad home inspector figurine. And it's like, it's funny. It's like a notepad and a can of beer and a magnifying glass and a flashlight. And anyway, it's funny. It makes the point that a lot of dads think that they're home inspectors. A lot of dads think that they know financing and that they know the real estate market and et cetera, et cetera. And I can say all these things because I'm a dad too. They don't know those things. They don't. Their dads are experts in a lot of things. This is not one of them for the most part. And so I don't know where I was going with any of that. just spent 5 minutes trashing dads. Sorry, dads. Don't be that type of dad, right? Help your kids out financially, not trying to be some sort of expert that you're not, right? But Gen Z, to put a bow on it, they have to recalibrate their expectations oftentimes. And maybe that first home is, a townhome, for instance, or a much smaller home than they planned on. But in theory, it'll grow in value, allow them, they can make their payments comfortably. It'll grow in value, and then when they have their first kid or whatever the case may be, when they get tired of that area or they have a job placement kind of thing, they can sell that home for a profit and move on to the next one that maybe is the one that they were hoping to get the first go around. So that's it for today's controversial generational episode. Please leave all of the hate in the comments. I'm here for it. I'm ready for the hate. You can comment on YouTube. Please like it, right? Like it. Don't dislike it. If you want to comment something you don't like, totally fine. And I will look at that, by the way. I'll look at it. I will respond either with my own comment under your comment or by just liking it or something like that. Please rate, review, all of those good things. And just a reminder to you guys, as always, my contact information is always in the show notes. Need a realtor that understands all of these different things and can help you navigate them in your head, in real life, through a transaction. I'm your guy. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will talk again next time.